Hi, Jackie. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. We have people just entering the room, so we'll give it a minute and we'll get going to protect your time this evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So I think we'll get going. Again, welcome. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. This is the Parkhill Golf Course Visioning Process virtual open house. It was designed to bring the community into the process. This is one of the different ways that you might engage in what's going on in the visioning process. It is a full agenda tonight, and we want to go over some of the things that you can expect from tonight. So let me see if I can advance to the next slide here. Courtney, you might have to do that. Your slide is disappearing.
Okay. Well,
one more back, I think. Okay, there we go. So let's talk about how to participate tonight. We have a great deal of presentations that will happen tonight. We'll do an overview of this process and some of the early study data. You also will hear a segment about the history of Parkhill and the role and purpose of the Community Navigators. And then we wanted to leave some time towards the end of the process to hear from you. A little bit of discussion and Q&A from you. And then we'll do a wrap up and talk to you a little bit about next steps. Courtney, if you can just go to the next slide. Let's talk about how to participate. We're in webinar style, so we've got a full house right now. We want you to know that everybody is welcome in this process. You might find that we have people that live right in the Parkhill community and a little outside of it, or you might find people that don't live anywhere near the Parkhill community, but the community is the community. So we're welcoming everyone. What we're going to ask you to do, and you can do this at any point tonight, is to put your question or your comment in the Q&A box at any time. When we get ready to get to the Q&A part of the event tonight, what we'll be asking is we'll call your name. We're going to ask you to go live with your question. So while the presentations are going on, you'll find that probably your microphone and your camera is off, and as we go live with the questions, then you'll be able to turn those on. We also will hold time at the end of our segment for people on the phone to ask their questions, because they won't have a way to interact in the way that the majority of you are interacting. One of the most important things about tonight, because we'll have limited time, is just to limit your questions and your comments to 2 minutes or less, so that we leave time for more people to be able to speak. The meeting is being recorded, and we will publish the recorded event on the website. Let's go to the next slide, Courtney, and I want you to just know some of the people that are a part of the panel. I call the panel the stage. Here are the people that are on stage tonight. I'll be your facilitator tonight, Dr. Juanita Mosby-Tyler. Courtney Levingston is with Community Planning and Development, and she'll be doing this initial presentation for us. David Gaspers, also representing Community Planning and Development. James Roy II, many of you know, is with DMCI, Denver Metro Community Impact, and he is taking the leadership role on our Navigator process. And he will be doing a presentation tonight on the history of Parkhill and beyond. John McGrath is joining us also from the City Attorney's Office, and then Owen Wells with Denver Parks and Recreation. So these are the people that you see tonight on stage. I want to kick us off in a little bit of a warm up. We want to launch a poll for you. And the poll is about Who are you representing? What community are you representing? I hope I can do this poll too. I'm always glad to type in my community. So let's launch the poll and hear from you. Which Denver neighborhood do you live in? So we want to invite you to just complete the poll for us. It should be right in front of you. And we'll give it a second and see how people are voting. We'd love to know who's represented in the room. So we'll give it a minute. And Laura, you might have to tell us how we're doing.
We're almost there. Let's just give it another second.
All right. Okay. So we're sharing the poll results. You get some sense for who is on the call. Thanks, Norm Harris. We see you in chat representing Parkhill. So we see how everybody's representing, and we've got people from almost every one of the community, and some communities that are not listed there and some that are outside. So you get a chance to see a little bit more about how we're being represented in this community forum. Thank you so much for doing that. All right, let's go to the next slide. I want to hand it over now to Courtney Levinston, who's going to give us an overview of this process. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler. Yep, my name is Courtney Levingston. I'm the project manager. I'm with Community Planning and Development. And we'll start tonight by talking a little bit about the background with the Parkhill Golf Course. It's a privately owned 155-acre parcel. Initially, the golf course was use was established back in the 1930s as a way for Clayton Early Learning to fund their charitable endeavors. In 1997, the city paid Clayton Trust $2 million to put the property into a conservation easement. The easement, it is the city's opinion that the easement agreement requires the property to be used for an 18-hole golf course. In 2018, the golf course closed. Next, as part of the Platte to Parkhill Stormwater Project, construction started on the detention pond in the northern portion of the property. In 2019, Westside Investment purchased the property from Clayton Trust for $24 million. The settlement agreement between the city and Westside allows for the deferment of the enforcement of the golf course use for a minimum of 3 years so that a public process may be conducted. So now that the property ownership has changed, the city is facilitating a community conversation about the future vision for the property. We're calling this a visioning process and not a small area plan because we're early in the conversation and we need to get clear community direction on the big picture vision of what should happen here. Should the property revert back to an 18-hole golf course? Should it be all park? Should there be a large park and open spaces and some level of development on the site? All options are on the table for discussion. We also want to be clear that development of the property without any large public park and open spaces is not an option. In terms of public engagement for the visioning process, Denver Metro Community Impact, a local nonprofit, will be leading the Community Navigators program, collecting input from those populations we typically don't hear from in the community. And we'll hear more about the Community Navigators program from James a little bit later in the presentation. We're also meeting with groups like R&Os and having broader open houses like the one we're having tonight to solicit feedback from the public. Additionally, we have surveys both online and mailed. And we also have a community steering committee that help us with input and feedback from the groups, and also to have more detailed conversations about the process and the input that we're receiving to help us synthesize that info. This is all culminating to help the city understand what the community's desires around that big picture vision are and what should happen next. I mentioned that surveys are one of the ways we'll be hearing from the community. There are 2 survey options available for residents right now. The mailed paper survey will provide statistically valid and significant results for the residents who live closest to the golf course. The online survey is a way for people who live a little bit farther away, but also care about this property to participate. If you did not receive a mailed survey, the online survey will be available at this link through April 30th. Questions are the same as the paper survey, so those are identical. Oh, and I think we also have a poll just to see, you know, did you receive a survey in the mail? So if you guys want to take a second.
Thank you, Courtney. I think the poll is running, and Laura, keep us posted on how that's going. Really interested in knowing if you've received a survey in the mail already.
Mm-hmm.
Just about everyone's responded. We'll give it another 5 seconds.
So it's an interesting poll. There are some people that are indicating that they live a little further away and they're waiting for the online survey. That's an opportunity area. There are also a nice number of people that have already completed it or have received it or are still waiting to fill it out. So thank you so much for contributing to that poll. Really helpful.
All right. Next, we're going to move into learning about the area from a demographics perspective with some supporting data from our equity measure framework. The Parkhill Golf Course property is on the western edge of the Northeast Parkhill statistical neighborhood. Understanding that those who live and work in the area experience their communities without neighborhood boundaries, we're looking at data for not only the Northeast Parkhill neighborhood, but also the half-mile and 1 mile radius surrounding the Parkhill Golf Course. Neighborhoods in these radiuses include the Northeast Parkhill neighborhood, as well as the Elaria-Swansea neighborhood, Clayton, Skyland, North Parkhill. Over the past decade, Denver has grown about 2% annually, where the population of the households in the 1 mile radius has grown a bit slower rate, around 1.7%. This slide shows the racial and ethnic makeup of the city as compared of the neighborhood as compared to the city as a whole. The top bar is Denver as a whole. The communities closest to the property are racially and ethnically diverse compared to Denver as a whole. And in terms of socioeconomics, the areas near the Parkhill Golf Course property have less educational attainment and higher percentage of households actually living under the poverty line than Denver as a whole. We know that increasing educational attainment and lifting households out of poverty are linked to better community health outcomes. Next, we want to talk a little bit about the studies we have underway. We're working with an independent professional consultant to provide us with data and high-level analysis about the area in 3 key areas: environmental, parks and recreation, market study, and a mobility study. They are currently finalizing these studies and will make them publicly available on the website once they're completed, estimated to be sometime in April. About the studies, Big Consultants did the environmental parks and recreation study, which focused on mapping and quantifying parks, recreation centers, and other natural features and assets. The market study is done by Arlen Youth and Economic Firm, which provides data around the needs and market demands in the area for housing, commercial needs, and the feasibility of an 18-hole golf course from a business perspective. Finally, the mobility study from David Evans and Associates, which is a high-level assessment of multimodal networks, understanding that gaps in the sidewalk network, bike lane system, transit ridership in the area, and safety data. These studies can help inform public conversations and provide some context. Over the next few slides, we'll share some of the early data received from these studies. Area parks and open spaces. There are several existing city parks within 1 mile of the Parkhill Golf Course, the closest being City of Exon Park to the south, City of Nairobi Park to the west, and Boyd Park to the southwest. However, these are smaller neighborhood sized parks ranging in size from 2 to 8 acres. The closest large park is City Park, which is a 330-acre park, but that's located over a mile away. And here, this table is showing an analysis of existing city park acreage, showing that Northeast Parkhill, Clayton, and Elaria-Swansea neighborhoods are below national and city averages for park acres per 1,000 residents. The Environmental Parks and Recreation Study is also looking at tree canopy coverage and urban heat island effects. The urban heat island effect is when you experience higher temperatures due to unshaded buildings and dark colored roads that absorb and radiate heat into the surrounding air. On this map, the red areas have hotter temperatures and the yellow-green areas have cooler temperatures. The industrial areas to the north and northwest of the Parkhill Golf Course have a higher heat index, but the golf course itself has a lower urban heat island index. So as the developed neighborhoods to the south and southwest. Tree canopy coverage can help mitigate the urban heat island effect. The North Parkhill neighborhood has a lower heat island impact with about 35% tree canopy coverage. The Northeast Parkhill neighborhood has a tree canopy coverage of around 18%. So golf. The market study will include an analysis of where golf courses are located and what the local demand is for golf. Market demand for golf courses are typically calculated by looking at the 10-mile radius around a golf course location as shown on the map here. Most golf courses are concentrated to the south between 5 miles from the Parkhill Golf Course and 10 miles from the Parkhill Golf Course. The study's findings and analysis will be complete in April and we will make these available on the website. Fresh food access. We know that many neighborhoods in Denver have limited access to grocery stores where they can get affordable and fresh, healthy foods. There are terms used to describe community access to food like food desert and food insecurity. Limited access to healthy foods can result in health impacts. The map here shows the location of full service grocery chain stores with the orange dots and specialty markets with the blue dots. Preliminary data from the market study shows that there is a gap in the full service grocery store supply in this area. Again, think orange dots here. With an estimated demand for an additional full service grocery store in the area. However, it's important to note that each grocer has their own parameters of how they select locations based on their own business model. Next, area rental housing. Preliminary data from the market study shows rents between 2010 and 2018 have increased between 30 and 60% in Northeast Parkhill, and that 64% of renter households in Northeast Parkhill, so that's about 1,235 households, are cost burden. A household is considered cost burden when more than 30% of their monthly income is dedicated to housing costs, which includes utilities, and is considered severely cost burden when they spend more than half of their income on housing. This slide shows data on the change in home sale prices in the area. The map on the left shows home prices in 2014 and 15, and the map on the right shows home prices in 2019, 2020. In the 1 mile radius surrounding the Parkhill Golf Course property, 6 years ago, you'll see we saw more blues and green color, which means sale prices between $84,000 to $375,000. And in 2019, 2020, the map on the right, that same area has no blue and it's mostly yellows and greens, which indicate sale prices up to $550,000. So here you can really see the increase in prices just in the past 6 years. Mobility, we're also looking at how people move through and around the area in the mobility study. The black lines on this map show where there are no sidewalks. The blue lines indicate that sidewalks exist, but they may be smaller than the 5-foot street width standard, the city standard. The city is also in the process of creating on-street painted bike lanes on Holly or Dahlia, I believe. In terms of public transportation, RTD data notes a citywide bus ridership decrease of 70% this past year attributed to the pandemic. However, while bus ridership in this area did decrease, it did not decrease as much as we see overall citywide. Based on crash data collected, we know that Colorado Boulevard is a safety concern whether you are driving, walking, or biking. Colorado Boulevard is included as part of Denver's Vision Zero high injury network. With the map here, the larger the dot, the more crashes, with the intersections at Colorado and 40th, Colorado and 35th, and Colorado and Bruce Randolph having the most vehicle crashes between 2016 and 2019. Oh, sorry about that. That concludes my presentation.
Courtney, thanks. That's a lot of information to take in. I want the audience to know Courtney did this presentation to the Visioning Steering Committee a couple of weeks ago too. So as you're thinking about your questions or comments tonight, this is one segment for you to be thinking about. Is there anything about that presentation that you would want some clarification on or have some thought around? Thank you, Courtney, so much for that. So I want to bring to the stage now James Rory II, who is with the Denver Metro Community Impact Team, who will give us some history of Parkhill. Now, let me tell you something about this one. James also did a more extensive version of this presentation in our last steering committee meeting. And one of the things that I loved about the presentation was the number of people that contributed in the chat room about their history and their memories of the Parkhill neighborhood. We're going to ask you to do the same. If there's something about what James is invoking in you about a memory, feel free to put it in chat and share it with everyone. That would be an amazing thing to do. We learned a lot of history just by hearing your comments. I know James also has a poll that he'll run later on in his presentation to get a feel. It's a trivia poll that he'll launch as well. So James, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tyler. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm going to go through a history of Northeast Parkhill. Might touch a little bit on Greater Parkhill, but it'll be mostly about Northeast Parkhill and the area around the golf course. And then the second part of the presentation will be about the Community Navigator program that we're running. So, for the first part of this, I want to give you 3 takeaways of what I'm going to be talking about here for the history of Parkhill. One, that Northeast Parkhill has been victim to racist, systemically oppressive practices from urban planning and beyond. Northeast Parkhill has faced a loss of generational economic wealth due to those practices. And then third, unsuccessful public processes may have contributed to distrust within the community there. To start things off, I want to say a little bit about me, give a little context of who I am and why I'm doing this project here. I have 11 years of experience in community engagement. I work right now, like Dr. Tyler said, I'm the executive director of Denver Metro Community Impact, which is a nonprofit. And I am an urban planning consultant. I'm also a student at CU Denver, where I'm finishing a master's in urban planning that I've been working on for like 50 years. So trying my best to get that done. I have all my coursework done. I'm just working on my thesis, and the thesis is actually on this work. What am I informed by? I'm informed by lived experience, research. So we got the data, books, and the articles that go into this. And yeah, just now we'll dive right into it. And oh yeah, and a little bit about my background as well too. I grew up in Denver. About a third of my life has been spent in Parkhill. Went to Smiley Middle School. Grandparents were longtime Parkhill residents that bought a house there in 1965 for $16,000 back then. Got a lot of history within the neighborhood and really love Parkhill to my core. So on to some of this history that we're talking about. In the early 1900s, across the country.
James, could I interrupt you really quick?
Yeah.
Do you have your slides up?
I sure do. Oh, I never put the slides up. I knew that. I was just testing you guys to make sure you knew that.
We thought you were just giving us your narration. We didn't know.
I was going off some slides too already. That's great. Okay, let's see here. Got too excited there. All right. You can see my screen now, right?
Yeah, we can see it.
I'll show you some of those other slides that we looked at, that I was reading from here. Anyway, so here's the current slide that we're on. In the early 1900s, across the country, the urban planning industry, the real estate industry, and the banking industry combined to produce long-term systemic damage and oppression, specifically and most targeted to Black communities. Those practices that divided and oppressed are terms that a lot of people are hearing lately. Redlining, it was block busting, and zoning is even one of those items that can be contributed to that. But another one that's on there you'll see is white flight, and that was a result of redlining, and not a practice, but a result and of what was going on there. I wanted to start talk about, you know, some of how urban planning has kind of contributed to the circumstance in which we live today. But you know, housing segregation, which everyone knows well about, having existed in the U.S., began in around 1865 and was ruled to be unconstitutional in 1917. And you know, one of the things that the people that I wanted to highlight here is someone named Frederick Law Olmsted, who is a celebrated planner. He actually designed the Washington Mall and did a lot of really cool things. But one of the things that I think is often left out of the history, because of, you know, where we're at and everything, I think it's important to highlight this, that Frederick Law Olmsted was also a segregationist and someone that that put a lot of thought into making sure that our zoning policies were where he's quoted saying they would prevent the mingling of people who are not ready to mingle and don't want to mingle yet. So that was, you know, I think there's when the urban planning industry starts off in that way, I think there's a lot of systemic pressure and problems that can be had from that type of those type of practices there. So the problem, one of the issues about that, we think about, I told you that segregation started in 1865 and ended in 1917. That was the segregation that was allowed by law and public policy. After that, there's something that's called de facto segregation, which we still feel the impacts of today when you see different communities that still feel very culturally different or and economically different. But this is the type of segregation from private practices that are not from law or government policy. So what I'm about to get into with the redlining and the block busting practices, those are some of the de facto segregation things that kept things the way they were. They were often nuanced and concealed. This is a redlining map. This was the measurement of which the urban planning, banking industry, and real estate industry valued property. And with the red outlined neighborhoods there, those were the worst neighborhoods to live in, according to a redline map. And it included a scale that actually included the words, the value of the lack of a single foreigner or Negro. And so this value proposition here, or value assignment here to parcels within the city was given with a lot of racial context involved. And so you'll see that 5 points is on there, and you notice that in the upper corner here, Northeast Parkhill is not redlined on this map, but there's a reason why it became a predominantly Black community.
James, I don't mean to interrupt you, yeah, although it sounds like that's what I'm doing. We do have a question while you're on this slide. Someone is asking if you know the date of this map.
I forget what the date was. Let's see. I can look that up during our pretty soon here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. but I believe it's definitely in the early 1900s, maybe 1925-ish, but I'll confirm that. So one of the biggest problems for Northeast Parkhill, or the things that shaped Northeast Parkhill, I should say, is a practice called blockbusting. This was a real estate practice where real estate agents would actually persuade white homeowners to sell their property cheaply and quickly because of the arrival of black and of black people into the neighborhood. Specifically in Park Hill is definitely black people into the neighborhood, and there were a lot of different ways that blockbusting was kind of carried out. But what it would do is produce a windfall of sales for real estate agents that ultimately benefited from those the quick sales of these properties that they were buying from white residents and selling to black residents, and often marking the prices up astronomically after making that happen. So some of the ways that blockbusting actually was carried out, there was flyers like this one on the right here, where it says it's basically calling a community meeting and letting people know that there's great danger ahead. And that great danger is that do you know that there are Negroes living on Glencoe, Ivanhoe, Jasmine, Kearney, 17th Avenue Parkway on Park Hill? Let us get together and protect ourselves. So these are the types of flyers and information that went out to produce the sales that went into blockbusting. And white flight was the phenomena of the people leaving the neighborhood very quickly. So what you would see is a neighborhood just change dramatically from this blockbusting and white flight situation. Now, how did that look like? I want to show exactly what that looked like in Northeast Park Hill. So on this slide, you'll notice that I've got a graph here on the right side and a chart of population on the left side. In 1960, there was around 9,000 residents in Northeast Park Hill, and 91% of them were white. During that blockbusting and white flight period, that completely, within those 10 years right there, similar population size, a little bit more there, but it completely flipped, became 88% black in 1970 and went down to 2% white at that time. That is the direct result of that change. I mean, of those practices and things that we're discussing. And there's more to say about that chart and kind of what it's showing on the right side of it as time progresses, and we're looking at a very different community right now, of course. I think one of the big issues around this as well too is what the predictability for the economic situation is when you have a neighborhood that has been stymied in that way. And so as you see here, there's a block, a dot density map on the left side of this slide. Each dot represents one person. I believe this data was 2016 census data that I used to make this map. But the blue dots represent a black population, green represents the white population, purple represents Latinx population. On the left side, on the right side of the screen, you see a low to moderate income map that shows the percentage of low to moderate income people living on each block group that is in the area. And you notice that it reflects pretty clearly a connection between the race and the percentage of low to moderate income residents of the neighborhood. I think there's obviously a lot of systemic things to be able to talk about when you're seeing that type of pattern right there, but I just wanted to be able to present that and give some more of that history. Now we can get into a little bit more of the fun things. I think it's really about how, the context of Park Hill. We have within the neighborhood a very unique layout that includes these 6 small business centers that I'm sure you all are aware of, that are home to a lot of really great small businesses, restaurants, lounges, markets, barbershops, salons, laundry, and coffee shops, and beyond, of course. And this little video I put together, a Google Earth slide here, will kind of show exactly where they are. So first we've got Oneida Park, or Oneida Park Business District, which is over on 26th or 23rd in Oneida. And you've got Kearney, which is on 23rd and Kearney. And then we've got the 23rd and Dexter Business District. And then the Fairfax Business District, which is actually where I'm sitting right now. And then we've got the former Dahlia Shopping Center and the former Holly Shopping Center, or Holly Shopping Center, which used to be called the Parkhill Shopping Center, actually. And I think the thing that's really unique about these spaces is that they've been home to affordable business retail for a very long time, and have really created a lot of community wealth for people across greater Parkhill. One of the things that's interesting though about that is that in Northeast Parkhill, unfortunately, in Northeast Parkhill, I said, as I was introducing those, I said former Dahlia Shopping Center and the former Parkhill Shopping Center, right? So I think there's some history that could be told through these things, and this is where we'll get a little interactive on the history of Northeast Parkhill. But Dahlia Square is what we'll talk about first. And in 1953, it was a brick manufacturing yard, and it produced over 24 million bricks from the clay soil that was at Dahlia, which is 38th and Dahlia. And so it's likely that your home, if it's made of brick, and was built during this time, that it has a brick from the brickyard that was over there. In 1958, King Soopers moved in, and it was the largest supermarket in Colorado at the time. Along with it, there was a laundromat, a dry cleaner, a cobbler shop, 2 gas stations, a dress shop, a donut store, a beauty salon, and a McDonald's. Also there was a place called Dahlia Bowling Lanes, which had 24 lanes and leagues that were ongoing with youth and adults. Now you'll notice that time we were talking about, as we were talking about the demographics in slides before, this is still a white neighborhood at this time, still in the 90% or 80%, upper 80% white neighborhood. In 1969, however, it was bought by a group of African Americans that were backed by the Presbyterian Economic Development Corporation, as they were lent $500,000 and became what they claimed to be the center of Black capitalism, and claimed to have the largest Black-owned shopping center in the entire country. And there's a lot of history that happened after that, where the decline really started to begin there. Quickly after the group bought the property, King Soopers left the area, closing their store and leaving a empty and defunct building, as you can see on the middle of the slide right here. And that's when it really kind of never recovered. And there's a lot of talk about that, because the neighborhood changed in the way that it did racially, that the feeling is that King Soopers left because of that change. It started to struggle from that vacancy of that building, because, you know, within the urban planning industry, like there's the term eyes on the street really, you know, produces a lot of safety. So there was, the eyes on the street were not there anymore. And so there was problems with loitering and crime. at the site. In 1973, the Dahlia Lanes closed, and it struggled on and off to be able to hold tenants in it. It was burned down and as well at one point. It was dilapidated and vandalized and had been roofless for many years. And then after a number of fits and starts, the group that owned the property lost it, and there were environmental soil issues and a lot of problems that came to Dahlia. And eventually, there were different fits and starts of planning processes that really tried to get things back to going and getting Dahlia back off the ground. And they ultimately, a lot of them failed. 2 of them failed. The last one, Mental Health Center of Denver, when actually the Dahlia Square Senior Home was the first to arrive in the area to help the redevelopment. And then after that, Denver Health's Parkhill Family Center, and most recently, Mental Health Center of Denver's Dahlia Campus for Health and Wellbeing, which is a beautiful campus with a garden, community garden, and mental health services and child care, and a lot of really great stuff to benefit from. I wanted to, at this point, I guess, if anyone has any history that they wanted to share in the chat about Dahlia Square and their memories of it, from the past or the present, or what things really kind of connect you to that property, that area, please go ahead and share that in the chat. I'll keep going at the same time as well.
James, there's some cool things in chat already. Jeff said, I got my first Barbie doll at Duck Walls in that shopping center on Dahlia. There's some really interesting memories.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't have my chat open right now. I don't even know where the window is for it, but I'll have to check out the messages when I'm done presenting here. The next area I wanted to talk about was the Parkhill Shopping Center, affectionately referred to as the Holly. It was once a junk pile for Clayton Holdings, actually, who of course owned the golf course at one point. So they would take most of their trash over to this area. This was before it was populated, of course. And in 1953, it was cleaned up and became a shopping center that had about 20 stores at it, including a Safeway. And so a Safeway was there until, once again, just like the King Soopers down the street, which is about 5 blocks away, closed in the 60s. And it ultimately started to become a hot spot for hanging out, and especially for the Black youth in the community. I remember that, my dad talks about hanging out at the Holly quite a bit, and actually, doing things that he thought were fun at the time, but also, getting into fights and doing stupid stuff. But he affectionately remembers those times. In the late 60s, 1967, there were some racial riots that were sparked between some tensions between Black police and Black youth in the community. There was a couple incidents where some youth had been beaten and some riots kicked off. It didn't help, of course, the next year that Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered, and the tension continued. And so in that time period, a hardware store was destroyed by Molotov cocktails. There was a lot of things going on there. Going into the 90s, gang violence and drug issues entered the neighborhood, and it struggled through some of those problems as well. The Hope Center is also one of the things that arrived in the neighborhood to really be a beacon of hope, I guess, for lack of a better term, that really took over the old Safeway building and created a program for developmentally disabled adults, as well as a children's program that's now housed at on Bruce Randolph and Elizabeth Street, run by Mrs. Jerry Grimes. In 2008, this big fast forward here, you see the fire that's in the middle of the screen. The shopping center was burnt down, and it was because of gang tensions that it was burned down. And so actually, when visiting Crip gang members that were upset with the Bloods that actually hung out at near and around the shopping center, so they burned it down. That building actually sat in rubble for more than 6 months, all the way into 2009, and was something that really caused a lot of pain, emotional pain for the community as they drove by it and walked by it and saw that the building was still, torn in the way that it was, and the realization that a building like that probably wouldn't sit for long in a neighborhood that is not a neighborhood of color like Northeast Parkhill. So some nonprofit folks and community activists got together to really say, this isn't good enough. We need to see change. They demanded it from the city, and so the city brought in the Urban Land Conservancy as well as the Denver Foundation to lead a redevelopment process that is referred to as HARP, Holly Area Redevelopment Process or Project. And ultimately what was built there was the Boys and Girls Club, which exists there now. It's in the middle of the screen, or on the far right of the screen on the bottom. And then also the Roots Elementary School, which is now the Center for African American Health's home base. And so, yeah, we've got, with Parkhill Shopping Center, a lot of history there, a lot of pain that has come from it, but also a lot of really great business, small business that existed there at one time and still exists there. There's a woman named Miss Dolores Wilson that owns that still owns one of the rest or the remaining commercial pieces that have retail, and as well as a bar called Horizon that she owns over there that she's been a long time business champion in the community and is really kind of held on to that affordable retail space for her community. So a lot of people have been able to benefit from that because of her. But I also wanted to open that up again about the stories and the experiences of Parkhill Shopping Center, or the Holly, I should say. So go ahead and type those into the chat. I'll get back to them.
Lots of stories there too. Hey, James, you have a poll. Do you want to do your poll now? It's a trivia question.
Is Courtney? It's the one that you wrote, right? Should we do it at the end, or do you want to? Because I've got one more slide to go on history. Whenever you say. Okay, I'll do this one more slide, and we'll do that poll then. Okay, great. Cool. Now I wanted to get to the Parkhill Golf Club. Of course, the reason why we're meeting today. The top three pictures that you see there are pictures from the past of when it was the Clayton College for Boys, and it started admitting orphan boys in 1911, and it was specifically for white male orphans. And that was, and that it was that way all the way until 1969, when the Colorado Supreme Court found it illegal for Clayton to restrict its services to white children. And ultimately it had to change its policies and open those doors. The golf course property was where they kept the dairy and farm that was located there. So the orphan boys would learn, farming techniques. You could see that they had cows there, they had chickens, they had all kinds of stuff to train themselves on, of course. It became a golf club in 1932. So Parkhill Golf Club opened in 1932, and it, the sentiment was that and it was probably very true, of course, that it was very unwelcoming to Black residents at least until 1969. You could probably assume that after 1969, the change of the law didn't change the sentiment yet, but that was something that really, had its place in Northeast Parkhill, as it was, of course, at that point a 90% plus Black community. However, in recent history and things that I've heard from family, friends, community members, that Black golfers and residents of Parkhill have a lot of fond memories of that neighborhood. It's where a lot of people golfed their first round of golf, where there were summer programs there. Actually, I heard from a young guy in his 20s that grew up in Northeast Parkhill that said that he was a part of a summer program where he was able to build a golf club and really learn about golf, and had a lot of fun doing that. So, there's a lot of fond memories around the golf course, but then there's even, what I've heard is even more fond memories around the gathering space, which was the clubhouse. There's a lot of really cool stories and parties that have happened at the clubhouse. A lot of fond memories there. Actually, can speak from personal experience there. My mom had her 40th birthday party there, and it was Matrix themed, so she was dressed as the characters of the Matrix. Had a lot of fun. I remember that like it was yesterday, but it was, I don't want to say it's a while ago because I'm dating my mom. She might hit me in the back of the head from wherever she's at. But it's good times of that were going on that people have had in that clubhouse. So once again, I think stories that people have about the golf course, the clubhouse, please feel free to share those. And now, Courtney, we can go ahead with the survey question.
So here's your trivia question. I think James is going to buy you a new car if you win.
Yep.
That's what I heard.
Sure.
What was the largest Black-owned shopping center in the country in 1969? Ooh. Okay, so people are voting, James. Laura will give us an update on how we're doing with the poll.
This question's a bit harder than where do you live, so it's taking people a little longer to think about it. But we're pretty close. Give it another couple seconds.
Great. James, this was hard.
There we go.
Is that right, James?
That is right. 64% of everyone got it right. So it was Dahlia Square, and I should say that was a claim that the ownership group had. I don't know if that is a confirmed claim, but it is a claim. So
that's great. Well, you have to buy a new car for 81 people, just so you know.
There we go. New Hot Wheels. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Now I'm going to move into talking about the Community Navigator program that we're running, and give you a little bit of context of what Denver Metro Community Impact is and why we're a part of this process. Oops. So, just a little background on DMCI. Our mission is to advance equity and generational success by elevating the voices of the systemically oppressed through the facilitation of organizational collective action led and constructed by the community. And the vision for that is equitable Denver communities where children are thriving, not just surviving. And so we do that by really carrying out a framework called collective impact, which is about eliminating the silos of nonprofit work and informing the values and goals and visions through data, and making sure that there's a collaborative processes going on that really produce the change that can come from that. The framework can be applied to a lot of different issues. Obviously ours is on Denver, but there are collective impact organizations across the world. And some that either are on food scarcity, some that are on education. Name the topic and probably have a collective impact on it. What we do within that collective impact framework is we're what's called a backbone organization. And a backbone organization is really supposed to lead that collaborative work. We don't do any of the programming, but what we do is make sure we recognize all the moving pieces that are going on in the community to make sure that change is happening. And so our leadership, our community leadership, is carried out by cultivating the community engagement and ownership, guiding the vision and strategy, collective vision and strategy of our partners, supporting aligned activities of those partners, establishing shared measurement practices, advancing policy, and mobilizing resources to meet the needs that we're seeing. We do the collective impact framework just a little bit differently than most. And the framework itself, the trend is starting to move in the direction that we actually do the work, which is, as you can see, that top bullet point it says cultivate community engagement and ownership. That's something that is not actually listed in the typical backbone organization framework for collective impact. It's something that we've added to it, recognizing over we've been around since 2017 or 2015 actually is when the idea, some community leaders came together to form the idea. 2017 is when I got started with it. And, through that, recognizing some of the shortfalls of collective impact, which is more of a grass tops situation, usually leaves out a little bit of leaves out the community. And so we've flipped it and made everything that we do sourced from the community voice and making sure that we carry out things that have been expressed by community. So, that leads right into what our workflow looks like here. Our workflow, at least like I said, starts with community voice. You see that second line says community advocate. That's the navigator right there. And ultimately from that voice and the navigator, we're producing a report that goes into informing the collective action that would eventually go into the work that that a number of different nonprofits would collaborate on, producing the advocacy solution and change that is delivered right back to the community, with the community checking along with it the entire time. For this process, we're focused right here on that top piece there. So you can see that the Community Navigator program is that blue box right there. The collective action that comes from the report that we're creating as information for that is the work that we're not a part of, but we're hoping to be able to be helpful in that process as well too. The overarching goals of the navigators are to engage and organize the marginalized and harder to reach population around the Parkhill golf course. And that's the focus is on the African American, Latinx, seniors, youth, and renter population of the area. The responsibilities of each community navigator, which these are actually community members that are paid to engage with their community. They're going to be sharing, they share project info, collect and track the feedback that we're getting, distribute flyers if needed, and which we haven't done that, but communicate back and forth with us. Then they're organizing, each of them are organizing 2 Parkhill golf course talks, which are intentionally small conversations to be able to glean the experiences and opinions of the community. And then we're also distributing gift cards to each of the participants that are part of those meetings. And then we're also testing another thing on here, having one-on-one community conversations. So each community navigator is tasked to have 16 community conversations, one-on-one conversations. And the reason why we're doing these intentionally small meetings and one-on-one conversations is to really an equity piece here. When you think about the typical community meeting, a typical stage like this, if this were, for example, the typical public meeting, we would have a lot of people in the room, and not everybody would be able to share their opinion. And so, except for folks that are comfortable with, sharing in front of a lot of people. So this is to be able to really change that dynamic and give more room for people to have that time to talk and have themselves heard in a lot of ways.
James, while you're here on this slide, we have questions that are coming in chat and coming in through Q&A. But while you're right here, there is a question that says, can you talk us through the request for proposal or selection process for DMCI? That's one of the questions. And one of the questions really talks about the funding of the Navigators. Are the Navigators expected to follow the narrative that the city is pushing, or are they free to advocate for different points of view? Just anything that you might share with us, your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so I'll answer about the RFP process first. There were conversations that I had with the city. What was that? I can't even remember what time period that was, but I know that I was able to talk with Courtney before everything was starting to move, and really kind of telling her about DMCI and all the things that we were doing. At that time, we were Parkhill Collective Impact. And eventually an RFP was released about, this concept of community navigators, which was something that we were already starting to firm out in Parkhill in a lot of ways. And that was even before, this is a process that we're going to be using regardless of our engagement with the golf course, but thought it would be useful for this project. And so we answered to that RFP and won the project there. For the as far as the community navigators are concerned, what they have been trained and instructed to do is neutrally facilitate these meetings and glean the experiences of the community by really keeping the conversations loose and making sure that they are about the benefit of this property is, whatever their opinion might be, and how that affects themselves and the people closest to them. We've been very, very clear about that with community navigators. I think however, I would say, once our report comes out, we'll be very clear about some of the failures around that as well too. And I also will get into another slide that'll tell you a little bit about, what this report is and what it isn't. And that'll be in just a couple slides here that'll hopefully give some more insight to what, our Community Navigator program is.
So James, let me ask you, we are running short on time, and we really want to leave this last hour for the community to weigh in and ask any questions that they might have. So if we're getting close to the end of your presentation, that'd be awesome.
Pretty close. Okay. How long should I wrap it up in like 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Fantastic.
I think I could do that. So we talked a little bit about the Parkhill talks just a second ago, because from those questions, actually, these are those intentionally small conversations. What we provide to them are the food, gift cards for people that are participating, and the community voice representative, somebody that works for our organization that does the notes and helps with the facilitation. The one-on-one conversations are something new. We haven't ever done these before, so we're testing it out. We're having our navigators really, collect that info, figure out what it is that people feel about the golf course. They're supposed to, of course, neutrally facilitate that, or neutrally talk about that as well too. But they also want to talk about the sentiment behind things, the moods and feelings. We want to be able to say where the trust and distrust might be, where the feeling of anger or whatever it might be that they are feeling from this. And then lastly, or actually second to lastly, we've got the timeline. So wrapping up the meetings on March 31st for this first round here, at least. The goal was to have 16 talks with 8 to 12 community members at each. And through those talks, we're engaging 128 to 192 community members, and then 128 one-on-one conversations. We'll produce the report that will go out to the community and the steering committee for the meeting on April 13th. And then we'll also be presenting those findings, or the community navigators will be presenting those findings at that time. The total community members that'll be engaged, we expect to be around 256 to 320 people. What the Navigator process is it is a pilot. We're seeking the methods of, seeking methods of equity in public planning processes through this. This is also a paid partnership with community members. So like I said, these community navigators are paid for their time and their work on this. This is to eliminate the barriers of participation. So we're talking about, the time periods that meetings are held. So we have a lot of different times that, because of our, how many different navigators we have and days that these meetings are having. We're appreciating participants with money for their time. Like I said, gift cards. The meeting sizes are small, so it gives space for people that might not do well in large meetings. And then we're producing the community voice report, which highlights the voices that aren't typically heard in public processes, especially in around the Parkhill Golf Course. So what the project is not a recommendation. The report will not conclude with a recommendation. It is not weighing in on the legal easement issues at all. And it is not claiming to represent all voices in the community. This is just a piece to be able to give some info to the steering committee and the community on what kind of conversations are being had throughout the community. So that's it for me. Sorry that took so long.
Thank you, James. We appreciate it. It's a lot of information to cover, but all very rich and important. We thank you for that. Also, James, just if you have an opportunity, there are some questions in the chat, not Q&A, in chat that you might want to take a look at. That might be things that would be easy enough for you to answer. If not, we'll try to pull all of those questions together if we can't get to all of them tonight. But I'm going to shift us because I want to use all of our time now to hear from community to the Q&A question and answer session. And we'll have John McGrath, just as a reminder, from the City Attorney's Office, and Courtney Levinston from Community Planning, Owen Wells from Denver Parks and Rec. James, stay tuned, stay online with DMCI because some of the questions might be for you too. And what we're going to try to do is just begin to call people up. It's a virtual environment. Basically, what we're going to do is invite you to the stage where you can unmute and be on video if you'd like to ask your questions. So we're going to start with one of the questions came in from James Mulligan. So we want to bring James to the stage. James, just unmute yourself and you go right ahead.
I'm here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not quite sure. By way of background, I used to play golf up there. I would disclose that, and I love the place. But my questions, just from following it from the newspapers and TV, really relate to what impact the prior operator's right of first refusal and the currently recorded conservation easement would have on this process and plan. And I guess I'm just kind of curious because those sounded to me like potential roadblocks to moving forward. And I thought it would be good to know the impact.
Thank you, James. And let's just throw it out here to the panel who might be best to answer that question.
I think that's probably me. This is John McGrath. I'm with the Denver City Attorney's Office. That's a good question, James. Thanks for asking that. And I would activate my camera, but I'm having trouble getting that to work right now. So really, the former operator of the golf course is essentially out of the picture. Arcus Golf had a lease agreement with Clayton to operate the golf course. When Westside purchased the property, they also were able to arrange for Arcus to transfer their interest in the lease to Westside. So really, for all practical purposes, there's the right of first refusal. To the extent it exists, it is owned by the current owner of the property. So it's really not an impediment at all to the process that we're talking about today, or the validity of the conservation easement.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay. Next up, I'm just going to keep us moving with this so we can get.
Well, what, John, just one clarification. What did you say specifically about the conservation easement?
Well, the conservation easement remains in place. It was re-recorded in a substantially identical form to the form that it was originally on the property in when Clayton sold the west side. So the easement has remained in place throughout. The easement will remain regardless of frankly who owns the property or who it's bought or sold to, or the effect of a right of first refusal.
And so just to finish that off, I'm sorry, I don't mean to go on. How will that specifically impact plans?
I don't think it will have any impact whatsoever. I think, again, for all practical purposes, the right of first refusal in the former operator's lease is essentially terminated. It's probably not technically terminated because Westside actually acquired the lease, but Westside owns both the lease and the property. So
yeah, and John, I'm talking about the conservation easement. Sorry.
Oh, I'm not sure what the question is. The conservation easement remains in effect as always.
And how will that impact any plans going forward? In other words, the conservation easement.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, the conservation easement, to the extent that any of these plans would require action to alter the terms of the conservation easement, that would be something that City Council would have to approve of. So that is a real estate interest that the city owns, and to make any change to a real estate interest would require City Council approval.
But the City Council could make a decision. I was reading in the papers that it said it had to go to court to somehow eliminate.
It may have to go to court. We would have to determine that based upon what the specific plans are, to determine whether or not the state statute would apply in any given set of circumstances. But we really can't evaluate that in a vacuum. We would need to understand, what the specific plans and modifications are. The state statute speaks to terminating or releasing the easement as opposed to amending the easement. So, theoretically, this process could, one outcome from this process could be a proposal to amend the easement, which would require, again, City Council approval and may require judicial approval, but we would have to, again, understand what specifically is being proposed.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, James. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.
All right. Next up, we have Jasperview. Go right ahead with your question.
Hi, sorry. I think my question was, what was the tree canopies when Courtney was talking about that? I think it's just, it was during the heat island area, so I was just kind of curious about that. But no, you don't necessarily need to respond here. You can respond in the Q&A if you need to.
Courtney, you or Owen, did you want to weigh in there? Thank you, Jack.
Sure, I can just do real quick that just in terms of what we mean by tree canopy, we're talking about sort of the branches and leaves that make up the crown of a tree and the area of the ground that is, sort of covering vertically. But it's a proxy for us to think about how green our environment is. And obviously trees provide a host of environmental benefits. And so it's one way that we it's one of the metrics we use as a city to try to capture some of those benefits. And we have a citywide goal of trying to increase our tree canopy to 20%. And I think in some of the background presentation material, Courtney has some nice slides that talk about the existing metrics for the surrounding neighborhoods.
Thanks.
Thank you, Owen. Jasper, thanks so much. It looks like the next person that we have is Robin Fishman. And we're waiting on Robin to come to the stage. Okay, there's Robin. Robin, you go right ahead.
Hey, sorry, my video cut out right as you were calling on me. So, hi, sorry. So you stated earlier that that one thing that cannot happen is that 100% of the property cannot be developed. But what minimum percentage must be preserved as open space? Is it only 10%? Is it 50%? Or is that something that would change when the conservation easement is changed?
Hi, Robin. I can take a stab at that question, and maybe Owen can help maybe follow up if I do miss anything. But we talk about options, that all options are on the table. So we're really going to the community to ask what their vision is. 100% open space, some development, and what percentage of open space would be desired, right? There's not necessarily, like a set percentage. We're asking the community right now what their vision is for the site.
Okay, I guess my follow-up to that is, I'm concerned that people will vote to change it, hoping for something like a grocery store to fix the food desert and some affordable housing. And then what will happen is it'll be a high-end grocery store and a developer will buy their way out of affordable housing, because we've seen this bait and switch happen a lot around Denver. Is there something that can be constructed where if there's a vote to change it, that it is very specific for exactly what is allowed there and exactly how much open space is there?
So, we do have a commitment. The city's committed right now to, if there is some level of development, a large and significant park and open space. We can say that right now, that there won't be any development without a park of significant size. Development agreement, a lot of tools, if this process were to move forward, and some level of development would be contemplated on the site, we could use tools like development agreements to help secure a minimum size of park and open space. There's a lot of different tools.
And I would add really quick, Courtney, other community benefits like affordable housing or the types of retail, et cetera.
Yeah, I think you understand though why the neighborhood might be a little skeptical about this. And I think it's being sold to people as, here's this nice warm fuzzy about how the community used to be, and let's bring this back. And I just don't want to see people voting for something that they think will help, that will actually end up hurting and just end up with more high-end condos and more change that doesn't help. So
absolutely. Couldn't say it better.
Yeah, Robin, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. We really do. The next person that we have is Ricky Padilla. And Ricky, you go right ahead when you're ready.
So this is actually Tana Padilla. Yeah, my question was about the navigators who are going to be on the streets, just because of all the racial history, not only here in Denver, but in America at large, and with heightened, that being heightened with thank you cameras. Just wondering, how are we making sure that if people are going door to door or handing out flyers, that we're being sensitive to those who have lived here much longer than I have, who might be people of color, but don't feel comfortable necessarily talking to a white person about their real feelings and being able to be vulnerable. So are we making sure that the navigators are diverse and not just white people knocking on doors, asking people of color to, be vulnerable with them? So just being sensitive in that way.
Thank you for that question. James, you want to weigh in there?
Yeah, sure. Actually, all of the navigators are BIPOC representative. And so, oops, I didn't start my video. So yeah, that's easy answer there. And I can give you a breakup. I could look at our list and give you a breakup of exactly how they represent, but that is...
Yeah, that's not necessary. I'm always sensitive to that. So I appreciate that it's going to be BIPOC and not us white. I'm a white person. My husband is not, but I'm white. And so I'm just sensitive to those feelings and emotions. So
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it too. We appreciate it. Next up, we have Milagros Bersalo, and you go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for providing this forum and for letting me ask my question. My question is, I know that you all shared a little bit about the weighted surveys when you were sharing kind of the overall, all the different inputs in the whole visioning process, and I appreciated you kind of giving that big picture. I'm wanting to know, there's obviously a lot of different people here in this forum and just kind of participating in this process. I'm curious to know, how are all of those things going to be weighted in the overall policy recommendations that are going to go into the small area plan? And how are the voices outside of the weighted survey, how are the voices of the community members living directly in Northeast Parkhill and the kind of other close neighborhoods going to be in the forefront? I appreciated hearing more about the community navigators from James, but I know I was also kind of an audience member just listening in on the last steering committee meeting, and that was a question there. And then I misunderstood, it seemed like their recommendation was going to be weighed heavily. Can you guys just clarify, what are the weights of all the recommendations and the different things coming in? I don't understand, and I would really appreciate understanding that just as somebody living in Northeast Parkhill. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to weigh in there? Maybe several people.
I'd love to weigh in just for a second to just reiterate again that our report is not a recommendation, that it is just reporting on what was talked about and what the sentiment was and the types of things people talked about. Our report, our meetings that are being held in the one-on-one conversations are strictly staying on, experiences and how how they would personally interact with, the space, and whatever comes, our data that we are producing from that, from a qualitative perspective, that we'll be pairing up with some quantitative data, will not recommend anything other than just showing what we talked about.
Yeah.
Had that. Thank you. Yeah, I understand that. Thanks.
Yeah. And, we were talking about those 4 main inputs, and of those, everything will be treated equally. With that said, there is a conscious effort, like you mentioned, to make sure that we're hearing from and prioritizing people who live closest to the golf course property, and we're prioritizing racial equity in decision-making. What's really important here is transparency. We're making sure that the survey data will be available on our website for you to look at. The steering committee meetings recorded, made public. These are recorded for view. All these different inputs will be, transparent and available for the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your question.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Next up, we have Frances Coleman. Frances, you go right ahead when you're ready.
Hi, it's nice to see you, Doctor.
You too.
I was interested in the demographics that Courtney had on her slide. And she did explain it, but if we can look at that again, I would really appreciate it and maybe take a little time looking at that and its impact. I didn't get the slide number, so I hope you know which one I'm talking about. By the way, I sit on Prab, and that's why I hooked on.
Yeah. Courtney, do you know what slide Frances is referring to?
The demographic slides in the beginning of the presentation.
Right.
We will make the slide deck available
Okay.
after the meeting, and it'll be online, and I can follow up with you, Frances, with the link to that when we have it posted on the website, the slide deck. And also, the market study, the data that we have will be available in those technical studies as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Frances. Next up, we have Danielle Ongart. And Danielle on the way. Okay, that's great. Danielle, you go right ahead when you're ready. Danielle, you go right ahead when you're ready.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm so sorry. Of course, my computer internet just went out at that second. But thanks everybody. I basically have two sets of questions. So the first is about if open space is the kind of chosen method, then I'd like to know what happens then. So does the city have to buy it? If so, at what cost? And then is there a basic timeline the city would have for when and how that would be developed in that process? And if it's not going to be developed right away, what would be done with that space at that time? And then on the other hand, if the decision is to allow some development, what would the affordable housing requirements be? What would the fine for the developer be if no affordable housing ended up happening? And then is there anything we can do at this stage to hold the developer accountable to the ideas that have come out of this, or that will come out of this process, knowing that there would still be a second process that would have to happen if development is going to happen? So thank you. I know it's a lot, but it's in the chat too.
Thank you, Danielle.
Would you like me to start, Dr.
No,
Tyler? I think the first part is least Parks. I'm happy to.
Yeah, that'd be great, Owen. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Danielle. Those are really great questions, and they really illustrate a lot of the variables and the complexities that go into park and open space development. So I can't give you direct answers right now, but I can give you some color that kind of explains that parks planning isn't as simple as it might seem. It's not a simple one-step action. So like if I'm just thinking broadly about how we handle a new piece of property that's coming into our portfolio, right? We have to assemble the land or acquire it. That can happen in a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's purchase, sometimes it's donation, sometimes it's set aside through a dedication or reservation through development processes. So I can't, say which route that's going today. What we're really interested in, and that's why I'm here, is kind of just understand this community's intention and vision, and then we can kind of start organizing our department to understand how we would realize that, because they're different tools. And you're absolutely right. That's only step one. So once you have land assembly, right, we have to figure out what we do in the interim. And that's my colleagues on our operational side, we need to figure out how to keep the site safe and secure and how to maintain, structures or vegetation on site. Obviously, there's some amazing trees out there. We typically, for any large community scale park, would then have a master planning process, which is a very involved intensive community process that kind of dives deep into like, what is the vision for this park? There's many different types of open space in parks, and what kind of investment it'll take to realize that vision, depends. If it's a primarily native thing with walking paths is very different from a highly actively programmed park, but we kind of drill through that with the community through a planning process. Then we work through detailed construction drawings if warranted, and then, construction projects. So it's a short way of saying it's a long process. We are excited about it. Unfortunately, we're really super early in the process, so we're not able to give, those kind of cost estimates because there are just so many variables.
Great. Anyone else wanting to weigh in on Danielle's question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is Brad Weinig from the Department of Housing Stability, your host at the city. Danielle, I attempted to try to address your question in the chat around affordable housing, and for that matter, a variety of other community benefits. But the answer, should the process result in real estate development of any kind of being contemplated, it would require a substantial rezone and a pretty robust planning process, as well as a negotiated development agreement between the developer or developers and the city that kind of would cover all of the various aspects that we would want to see as a city as a reflection of community engagement and output and outreach. And so affordable housing would certainly be a part of that. There would be no way for them to just write a check and get out of their obligations. This is a substantial enough and catalytic enough project where, on-site satisfaction would have to be at a minimum a part of it, and perhaps other contemplated remedies as well, but no way to kind of just buy their way out. So we'll make that clear. Did I answer your question?
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else for Danielle?
No, thanks so much. This definitely helps to make things clearer. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
We appreciate you right back. Next, we have Chantal Harrison. Chantal, you go right ahead when you're ready. Chantal, we're kind of seeing you, but we don't hear you. Nope. Try to say something. Let's see if we hear you. Nope. We can see you now, but we can't hear you.
Did we try to read her question? Yeah.
Chantal, do you want us to read your question aloud? Okay. Laura, can you see the question to read it to us?
Yeah, Chantal, this is what I saw submitted from you in the Q&A. Just nod your head if this is correct, or if you want to put something in the chat to add on to it, feel free. So what I see here is the developer has proposed only 60 acres for park space. Does that 60 acres include the detention pond?
I am happy to jump in for the team here. So at least from a city side, I don't know what the right number is for the open space. As Courtney alluded to, we've got a commitment to have a substantial community scale park and open space that is right for this community. I don't know what that number is. I know the developer has thrown out numbers, but I can't speak for them. I will say that it is possible for stormwater detention and open space to coexist when done thoughtfully. And I would hope when an open space network is conceived for this site, that we're thinking about thoughtful ways to make that part of it. However, stormwater retention alone is not sufficient for us to do a community scale park. You know, we need to have land that's unconstrained by stormwater infrastructure. It limits some aspects of what we can do for a park. And as I mentioned for the previous commenter, you know, we don't know what those features should be and what amenities are really desired by this community. We need to make sure we have land that is not subject to inundation, and that needs to be actually buildable land if we're to build, you know, athletic facilities or anything of that nature. So I guess that's hopefully a partial answer. We would expect that there'd have to be substantial open land that's unconstrained by stormwater infrastructure.
So Owen, Chantal has some other parts of a question too. I think questions are coming in two places, but another part of our question is, what guarantee do we have that the developer will build affordable housing? That was talked about a little bit on Danielle's question, and not just a few units, along with the other community amenities that have been requested. Have other surrounding areas been explored for the fulfillment of these needs?
That might be a Brad question, so I'll defer to the host.
Brad question, yeah.
Yeah, again, it would all be dictated as part of a large negotiated development agreement with a developer. And again, the expectation would be far greater than any sort of expectation of minimum achievement. So there would be, we would need to see a direct response to identified community needs and desires in this process to go forward and get approval by city council for something that's this kind of large and represents such a large substantial change in zoning. Again, if the development path is the one that's kind of visioned as part of this process. So we would be here to ensure that affordable housing was truly affordable and met needs to the extent, you know, feasibly possible in as part of this development. To the question around other surrounding land uses, I mean, again, we can't dictate other than through land use policies, right? Exactly what goes where. It is ultimately a kind of privately owned property process that people need to propose. Our job is to ensure that affordability is created everywhere we can possibly create it via whatever, you know, tools and mechanisms that we have, like a development agreement or rezoning or other processes.
Great, thank you for that. One more thing, I just want to make sure, Laura, in Q&A, did Chantal have a question about navigators that you saw?
No, I just scrolled back through everything. Chantal, I'm so sorry, I'm not seeing one about navigators from you. If you're able to type it in the chat, then we can answer it that way. There are a lot of questions coming into the Q&A, so if I'm just missing it, I truly am sorry.
Laura, I think she wants to know who the navigators are, when they might know, and how they would get to meet them. Is that right, Chantal? It's like playing charades.
So
I think James might be able to answer that question,
Oh,
Dr. Tyler, about.
So
I was waiting
navigators.
for, was there a part two of the question?
the question is, considering their paid participants, are they expected to follow the narrative that the city is pushing, or are they free to advocate for different points of view?
They're not advocating for any point of view. They are supposed to neutrally talk about the property. Does that answer? That answers the first, or that question, right? And then the other part was, will we learn who the navigators are? And the navigators, so I'm not sharing the individual names of them, mainly because of just so that they are folks with lives as well too. I want to make sure that questions come to me and I can direct them to the navigators. But we have 8 of them going, two of which are organizations or small businesses in the area. And yeah, and the way that they're outreaching to the community is through their existing networks. We don't expect to be able to reach everyone, but we onboarded navigators that are well-known and connected in Northeast Parkhill and have been making sure they're connected in the connecting the folks and making having those conversations go. So.
Thank you, James. Shanta, thank you. Thank you for letting us piecemeal your questions like that. I hope we represented you well. Thank you for that. I want to pause for a minute because I want to make sure we get a chance to hear from people that might be on the phone and not actually on Zoom video. Do we have people on the phone that would want to pose a question? If so, just unmute yourself and go right ahead. We want to hear from you as well with any questions that you might have. Anyone on the phone? So if your number ends in 290, just unmute yourself and go right ahead. If your number ends in 290, go right ahead. And you'll have to unmute yourself.
Do they have to do *6 to unmute?
Shouldn't. So if your number ends in 290, try *6 or just unmute yourself. Okay, that person disappeared. If your number ends in 311, unmute yourself or try *6. Yeah, it's looking like our people that are on the phone can't get unmuted. Oh, there we are. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering how the feedback that you're gathering in various ways, like for example, through the surveys, will be transparently shared with the community.
Great, thank you for that. Anyone from the city, you want to answer that one?
Yep. Oh. Hi. Yes, thanks for your question. With the surveys, we will post the results, the data online. That's how we plan on sharing those results with the community.
Okay, thank you.
I would add just really quick, just because we could clarify that we're going to try to post as much of the Community Navigator report, the steering committee meetings are being recorded. So all these inputs, we're trying to be as transparent as possible to get the information back out to the community so everybody can hear everyone else's voices.
Thank you, David. Thanks for your question. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Telephone number ending in 735. If you unmute yourself for *6, you can go right ahead. Your number ends in 735. All right, how about number ending in 226? You can unmute or *6. Number ending in 721. Unmute or *6. And then I have number ending in 888. You can unmute or *6. Okay, it looks like our phone calls are not unmuting. I wanted to, we have just a few minutes left. I want to then go back to people that are online with us. Michael Miera, if we can bring Michael up.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Michael, go right ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, my name is Michael Miera from the Urban Land Conservancy. And, you know, the Urban Land Conservancy has a long positive history in Northeast Parkhill. In 2009, with the support of the city, we bought the land where Holly Square is, and we quickly worked with the community to have redevelopment plans, which the Boys Club and the African American Health Center is. And we also have bought 9 acres right next to the golf course. So we have 156 permanently affordable. What I want to talk about is 303 Artway, which is a heritage trail, and it's a future 4-mile pedestrian and bike loop connecting RTD's 4th in Colorado to the light rail station to key transit areas in North Parkhill. And the Heritage Trail is community driven, with local stakeholders playing a major role in the location design of the future paths. I have listed the history of the Heritage Trail and the goals of the Heritage Trail in the chat and in the question and answer. So when you get a chance, look at that. But we really want to see that any kind of development, if it occurs with Parkhill Golf Course, does take into consideration the priorities of the 303 area, of the 303 Artway Heritage Trail.
Michael, thank you so much. That addition is very helpful. I appreciate it. Let's bring up Maria Sepulveda. Can we bring Maria up? Maria, you go right ahead when you're ready. Don't forget to
I did not have a comment. I was listening to and trying to understand the usage of the property and how much would be allocated to open space. But thank you. This has been really helpful.
You're welcome. Thanks, Maria. Next up, we have Tashaka King. Tashaka, you go right ahead when you're ready.
How you guys doing tonight? My name is Tashaka King. I'm with the DJ Armstrong Foundation, and I'm a long time Parkhill resident. It's very important that the city hears that we want more than just a park. You know, we want more diverse, affordable housing, and rental properties and for sale properties. We want to see more grocery stores, you know. We want to see more rec centers. We want to see more things that's going to make the community actually bond. Just want to know when is this going to get started? When? You know, it's been in the talk for a long time, but you know, when is it going to get started? And those are just some suggestions that we, you know, see, because I live right across the street from the golf course, and I've lived around the golf course area my whole life here, raised my kids. I know a lot of people here. One thing that concerns me is that, like the Fairfax development, I feel like some of the business owners and residents over there didn't even know what was going on. Like the person that was in charge of the developer and things like that went kind of, you know, real underhandedly and throughout the block. And then next thing you know, here we go, we have different high rises and different businesses that really don't benefit, you know, real Parkhillans at all. So we don't want to see something like that happen again. You know, we're the voice.
Mm-hmm. Tashaka, thank you. Thank you so much for your comments. You're right. You are the voice. And I heard your feelings in this. And I also heard a little bit of a question when. The when is, it's already starting this process, at least this visioning process, to try to gather the voices of the community and the voices of the steering committee so that there's a recommendation. We are one of the inputs, the steering committee, to decision making. So we're in the process, but hear you loud and clear about what's most important to the community. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your voice.
Thank you for listening.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Next up, we have Evelyn Barnes. And Evelyn, you go right ahead when you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. My question has to do with, in general, outreach, and it is as follows. Most of the slides and the presentations are specifically about Northeast Parkhill or the greater Parkhill area in general. I wanted to know if anyone could explain the rationale behind including people who live outside the radius as identified in the PowerPoint slides. I do feel that although including anyone who is interested in this project is inclusive, I'm having a hard time just kind of wrapping my mind and understanding how this approach is equitable. To me right now, it seems like there's more equality being the objective and the overall aim, and just wanted some clarification and context around if I'm missing something or not.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you as well.
Yeah. Anyone from the city want to weigh in on Evelyn's important question? David?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. Great question, Evelyn. Yeah, really important to focus on the community members closest to the golf course. So that was one reason we've have the Community Navigators program, very intentional to have those residents engaging other residents closest to the golf course. We also went through the steering committee selection process where it was an open application, and one of those criteria we looked at was, do you live within a half mile of the golf course? I can't remember the exact number, Courtney, but I think it was a high percentage, over 30 or 40% were within half a mile. Same thing with the statistically valid survey that was focused in, and we wanted to have a geography that was as small as we could and make sure we had it be statistically valid. So most, actually all residents within 0.8 miles received a survey, and then some residents beyond that to the 1 mile radius. So we've been very conscious in trying to focus our input closest to the golf course.
Thank you. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Of course. Let's go now. I think we're going to have time for maybe one more, and then I'll give you some information about what we'll do with all of the questions that didn't get answered. Shane Murphy is up next. Let's hear from Shane. And Shane, you go right ahead when you're ready.
Yes, hello, thank you. Actually, I put my question in the chat, but my question was for Mr. Owens in regard to Denver Park and Rec. A few years back, or I think it was in 2018, as a city, we voted for a tax increase to preserve, actually to acquire open green space in the city of Denver due to the deficit. And I would be curious his thoughts on the use of this land, but also if this land being used as open space would qualify to meet the needs of that ballot measure and that taxes that we raised.
Sure, I'll try to give a little perspective. You're absolutely right, and we are thrilled and excited that the people of Denver voted to support expansion of parks and open space throughout the city in 2018 with a 2A ballot measure, and we have been gearing up to do just that. And we are right now, and I'd encourage you to listen in on those presentations if possible. We are in the process of developing our strategic acquisition plan, which will be a tool that our agency uses to establish criteria to help us guide informed decision making about potential acquisitions throughout the system, and to evaluate opportunities when they arise. And it's kind of it's a broader policy document. It doesn't like tag individual properties. You can imagine why, right? These are typically negotiations, and we can't jeopardize our negotiating position in that way. But there are several focus areas throughout that are key areas of emphasis in our acquisition plan, including equity, including a 10-minute walker rule to a park, climate resiliency and waterways, high density growth areas, facilities, which is like our structures like rec centers and maintenance facilities, and the mountain parks. So there's kind of 6 thematic elements that this acquisition plan will help develop some criteria to shape that. So long story short, yes, we are trying to figure out how to have a strategic plan that allows for us to grow our system. We know we're a growing city. If we stand still, we're not going to be able to continue to provide the kind of amazing park experiences that are sort of defining elements of a lot of this parts of the city, but we want to make sure we can continue to have a modern system that can keep pace with Denver's growth. So sort of broad brush, we are focused on that. In terms of our other strategic plan that guides all our decision making, it's the game plan for a healthy city. That also talks a good deal about where we stand in relation to our goals, in relationship to a 10-minute walk, in relation to equity investment, and in relationship to sort of just the general acres per thousand. So I think there's a lot of good guidance in those documents. And I think one of the reasons you heard early on from the city's commitment that any outcome that comes out as community vision needs to have some substantial open space component, because there are those opportunities to address some of our big game plan goals.
Thank you. One quick follow-up question. What is considered substantial?
That is open for this process to define. So truly, that is what the city is trying to do. I'm here in my role as parks. Obviously, I'm a parks person. I'm excited to talk about parks, but I'm not defining that for this community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane. We appreciate you. And Owen, thank you so much. So we're right about at time. I know that there are some questions we didn't get to. We were trying to work through the questions that people posted in Q&A, but we also know that there's been a lot of questions that were coming through on chat too. So it was really difficult to try to manage both for questions. So what we'll do is create a bit of a frequently asked questions document for you, where we'll try to answer the questions that we didn't get to tonight. We'll share it by email to everyone that was a part of the session tonight, so you'll get that. And also be looking out for the recording of tonight's meeting, because it'll also be online by next week. Just as a matter of next steps, we want to remind you to either send in your survey if you got that in the mail, or to take the survey online. And there's the website there on the screen, and it's open through April 30th. We are anticipating doing a second community open house like this one, either in late May or June. And then we encourage you to sign up for the email letter. More importantly, I personally, I'm sure the team does too, just want to thank you for carving out some time tonight to weigh in, to ask your questions, to prod, to get what you needed. And we'll continue to do that, because I think the more we can get questions answered, the better informed we can be on whatever the recommendations will ultimately be. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Have a really good night and be safe.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.